Welcome to This Explainer. We're diving into the deeply fascinating and honestly sometimes frustrating science of why we put things off. Look, we have absolutely all been there. You're staring at a blank screen, painfully aware of a major looming deadline. And yet somehow, you find yourself meticulously reorganizing your sock drawer, or maybe scrubbing the kitchen sink instead. In that exact moment, you get this powerful, physiological wave of temporary relief. It feels good. But as we all know, it's always followed by intense, crushing, later regret. Today, we're shifting our entire understanding away from this outdated idea of simple laziness. What the data actually reveals is a scientifically quantifiable self-regulatory failure. It's math, not a moral failing. By the end of this explainer, you're going to understand the exact mechanics of your own mind when it decides to delay, and way more importantly, how to finally break that cycle.
Let's kick things off with a totally staggering number that validates just how universal this struggle really is. Over 95% of procrastinators actively wish they could reduce their habit. 95%! This isn't just some niche problem for unmotivated people, it's everywhere. Think about it. Adults delaying a simple 5-minute dentist appointment for an entire year, or putting off drafting one difficult email for weeks at a time. Studies actually show that procrastination typically eats up over 1/3 of a student's daily activities, and it chronically affects up to 20% of all adults. So we all do it. The vast majority of us hate that we do it, and we desperately want to know how to stop.
Now, we have to recognize right up front that this is absolutely not a modern, smartphone-induced problem. It is so easy to just blame social media, video games, or endless streaming for our distraction, right? But check out this quote from ancient Greece. Hesiod wrote about the literal ruin of putting off work all the way back in 800 BC. Even Cicero, and later the meticulous architects of the Industrial Revolution, they all complained bitterly about it. The truth is, our brains are basically running on ancient hardware while trying to navigate modern, long-term deadlines. We've literally always struggled to prioritize distant, future tasks over the immediate, shiny gratification sitting right in front of us. To really bring this data to life, let's introduce a super relatable example straight from the research. Meet a typical college student we'll call Thomas DeLay. Thomas is about to experience the classic, entirely predictable cycle of temporary relief and eventual regret. So picture this. He gets a big essay assigned on September 15th, but the catch is, it isn't due until December 15th. He's got two choices: study now for a good grade later, or go hang out with his friends right now. When he dumps his heavy backpack on the floor, boots up his console, and jumps online with his buddies, he gets an immediate, overwhelming rush. It's this warm, deceptive wave of temporary relief washing right over him. He feels amazing. But he is unknowingly setting a massive mathematical trap for himself.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact trap Thomas is setting. Notice the flat, constant line representing the utility of immediate socializing. Hanging out with friends is always going to be fun right now, so its value to his brain stays consistently high. But then look at that exponential curve representing his essay writing. Because the essay is temporally distant, it's months away, its utility, meaning how much Thomas's brain actually values doing the work today, is incredibly low. It literally only intersects and overtakes his desire to socialize on December 3rd. For months, his brain rationally calculates that playing video games is the mathematically better choice. And then, bam, suddenly the reality of the impending deadline shatters his cycle of relief and plunges him right into physiological panic and deep regret.
So, to understand exactly why Thomas's brain chooses gaming over writing for all those months, we look to a brilliant scientific framework known as temporal motivation theory, or TMT. This was a massive breakthrough synthesis blending psychology and economics. It basically states that the utility of any task, meaning our actual desire to get off the couch and do it, is a math equation. It relies on a concept called hyperbolic discounting, which, I know, sounds super academic, but it's really just a fancy way of saying our brains are hardwired to heavily discount, or devalue, a reward if we have to wait a really long time to get it. We are constantly, subconsciously, weighing what we expect to get out of a task against how long we have to wait for the payoff.
Okay, so the crucial point here is how these 4 specific variables interact in the TMT equation to dictate our daily choices. Let's apply them directly to Thomas. First up is expectancy, essentially his self-efficacy. Does Thomas even know how to write a good thesis? If he doubts himself, his motivation plummets. Then there's value. Does he find the topic incredibly boring? If yes, the task aversiveness is sky high. Now you divide all of that by the delay, the fact that December is months away, and multiply it by his natural impulsiveness. His friends are texting him right now, making him highly sensitive to that delay. Put simply, Thomas heavily discounts his future good grade because the task feels terrible, and his impulsiveness is just screaming for immediate short-term relief.
Now, what's really fascinating about these insights is that they completely shatter some of the biggest myths out there regarding why we irrationally delay our work. For decades, clinical psychologists and the general public alike basically assumed procrastination was just a symptom of deep-seated anxiety or maybe a noble disguised form of perfectionism. Honestly, we use the perfectionism myth as an ego-protecting excuse. It gives us a secondary hit of temporary relief to just tell ourselves, well, I just care too much, so I'm putting it off until I can do it perfectly, rather than admitting we simply lack impulse control. But the meta-analytic data has a very, very different story to tell about that comforting narrative. As the correlation data reveals, perfectionism and anxiety actually have a remarkably weak link to procrastination. In reality, the correlation is practically zero. Let that sink in. Thomas is not delaying his essay because he's a secret perfectionist. The true culprits driving his evasive behavior are distractibility, impulsiveness, and just how boring he finds the task. Psychologists call this an overactive behavioral activation system. If a task is tedious, like sitting in a perfectly quiet library, which literally feels like physical torture to an impulsive person, your brain immediately scrambles for the nearest distraction. You seek immediate stimulation elsewhere because you just cannot tolerate the boredom. It truly is that mathematical and straightforward.
And this brings Thomas to a critical, deeply frustrating breaking point, known as the intention-action gap. This is the exact moment our good intentions completely betray us. Procrastination is so maddening precisely because it's often entirely unintentional. Research proves over and over that procrastinators fully intend to work just as hard as anyone else. Imagine the emotional weight of this gap. Thomas packs his bag, walks all the way to the library, sets up his laptop, neatly organizes his highlighters, fully intending to write. But then, there's this massive gap between what he intends to do and what he actually does when the moment to act arrives. Despite his perfect setup, he ends up opening YouTube anyway.
That sudden failure at the library perfectly captures the concept of preference reversal. Imagine a solid line representing the immediate reward of watching videos and a dotted line for the future payout of a finished essay. When both payouts are really far away, Thomas is completely rational. He genuinely plans to study. But as time marches forward and that delay physically shortens, his long-term rational plans are suddenly hijacked by smaller, more immediate rewards. It's not a gradual shift either. It's a violent, sudden hijacking of the rational brain the exact moment a short-term reward becomes immediately available. He hits that intersection point, his preference abruptly reverses, and trading his future success for the temporary relief of just one more video feels totally justified.
While that initial delay definitely provides Thomas with his much-desired temporary relief, it inevitably spirals right into last-minute panic, hitting the brutal regret phase of our cycle. It's now mid-December, Thomas is totally fueled by caffeine, pulling a miserable all-nighter, and producing subpar, rushed work. And this triggers what researchers call a deviation-amplifying loop. It's basically a doom spiral of lost confidence. Because Thomas produced a terrible essay, he gets a bad grade. That bad grade lowers his expectancy, or self-confidence. So the very next time he gets an assignment, the task feels even more aversive and terrifying to him, which virtually guarantees he'll procrastinate even earlier next time. This feedback loop is the true tragedy of the cycle.
And the real-world consequences of this are absolutely staggering, extending way beyond Thomas's college classroom. The data clearly shows procrastinators suffer from significantly increased long-term misery. We eagerly trade 20 minutes of feeling good on the couch for weeks of underlying low-grade anxiety. And there are huge, tangible financial penalties too. A massive H&R Block survey revealed that rushing through taxes at the last minute cost the average person $400 in errors. That resulted in over $473 million in U.S. tax overpayments in a single year. The regret phase always outlasts the relief phase, and we are literally paying a massive premium for our fleeting moments of distraction.
But hey, here is the incredibly empowering news. By understanding the science behind the temporal motivation theory equation, we can actively outsmart our own ancient hardware, just like Thomas can. If a long delay is the enemy, Thomas just needs to artificially shorten it. How? Well, first, he acknowledges the essay is incredibly boring, which directly addresses the value variable. Next, he manages his distracting cues by leaving his phone in an entirely different room to lower his impulsiveness. And finally, he creates tiny, proximal goals. He doesn't commit to writing a whole essay by December. No way. He commits to just outlining the introduction paragraph by dinner time today. This is exactly how we manipulate the math equation to our advantage. So, I want to leave you with this final critical thought regarding your own daily habits. Look at your life right now. What is the one major task you are irrationally putting off, continuously trading your long-term success for a fleeting moment of temporary relief? That temporary relief you are chasing right now is nothing more than a mathematical trap. Now that you know you aren't just being lazy, what tiny proximal step will you take today to break the cycle and avoid the inevitable regret? Do not wait for tomorrow to rewrite your story. The absolute best time to close your intention-action gap is right now.